Well, it's Holy Week. It'd be a bit strange as we have to put on hold all our Holy Week services, our walk of witnesses, and even the Easter Sunday service and our fellowship dinner afterwards. But we want to focus on the gospel reading for today. From I'm going to pick on this week the lectionary text, and so the gospel reading for today is from John's Gospel, and if you have it, it's going to be found in John chapter 12. And we're going to do verses 1 to 8. So if you'll read along with me, or I'll read this for us, and then we'll consider just a few brief thoughts on it. So, then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, who had been dead, and whom he had raised from the dead. And there they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of oil. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, "Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" This he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not always have." Well, for the rest of the story of Lazarus, I'll just refer you to John chapter 11. You can read that for yourself later. But here we find, in this context, we find that there was a time of fun and food and fellowship, a meal taking place where Jesus was there with his friends. But amidst the food and the fellowship, there was also Martha serving, so that even service was a part of this process. Then in a moment of what I presume probably was a moment of silence, a period of all the activity had kind of just died down, and people relaxed, and Mary came. And as Mary came, she offered her sacrifice of love and honor. But the problem is, as so often in our world, there's those that are skeptics, there's those that are the doubters, the disobedient, that just don't quite get the Jesus thing. We find them everywhere we go, don't we? So here on this first day of the Passion Week, we see someone that is giving to Jesus not a second-class bit of their leftovers, but rather something that in that day was of great value, something that had been saved and was now to be used to pay tribute to Jesus. And I think perhaps Mary probably didn't fully understand the timing of Jesus' death, that it was just to take place just a few days distant from this date in which this takes place. Yet, as in our time, we see that these doubters, Judas, he had to raise an objection about Mary and the quote-unquote the waste. But as it is with our own times, it wasn't about the waste as much as it was about how does this benefit me? And John was very clear to point that out to us. So, Jesus' task here was to put her gift and her offering into a perspective. And so he said to all that were present, as we read in verse 7 and 8, Jesus said, "Let her alone. She's kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not always have." And so I want to leave us here with this thought, if you will, that here was Jesus recognizing that even though Mary didn't necessarily understand the whole ramification of the timing of how this was going to play out, what Mary did understand was that Jesus was going to die. And this was one of her ways of paying honor to what he was going to do on their behalf. And I'm sure a lot of this, as we see with all the disciples, it didn't really come into a full understanding until later in the process, till after Easter Sunday, till after the Resurrection Sunday. So the challenge for us is, here was Mary giving her offering, but yet Jesus understanding, looking ahead, Jesus understanding his sacrifice that he was going to make, and how this related to what she was doing in the process of. And so he said, this she's doing in remembrance of my burial, even before my burial happens. So I leave us with the question, what are we doing about Jesus? Are we offering our best, or are we begrudging giving as unto the Lord? Or are we criticizing those that might do things that are for the sake of the Lord? And we may not have much ability or even much to give today. We all find ourselves kind of in a place of struggle at the moment. But we also may not have that same ability to give of our time as in the name of the Lord to other people in such an open way as we have been used to. But still, we need to find that moment of giving and that sacrifice for us to prepare our hearts for what takes place on Easter. So I leave you with this question. What sacrifice are you giving to prepare for Easter? And with that said, I say, let's be blessed. Let's stay safe in the coming days. God bless y'all, and we'll meet again tomorrow, hopefully a little earlier than today. Have a good day.